This is the third attempt to teach this lesson. I recorded it once, it didn't appear. I recorded it twice, it didn't appear. I hope this third attempt will appear. I certainly hope so. We are studying 2 Samuel chapter 13. 2 Samuel chapter 12 was the issue with Bathsheba, the son of David with Bathsheba, and with Uriah the Hittite. And now we are here trying again to teach the 13th chapter of 2 Samuel. It's a very important chapter because it deals with one of the horrible events in the life of David, in the court of David, in the family of David. And the text starts with the following words. After this, after what? After the sin with Bathsheba, after the son of David that was born from Bathsheba, the first son, dies, and David gets up after he dies and takes a bath and eats and relieves himself from the grief. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister. It starts with Absalom, not with his sister, not with Tamar. And that's because from chapter 13 to chapter 20, the main actor in this text is not King David, is Absalom. And how did Absalom get into this position of rebellion against his father, against King David? The secret of understanding that is here in chapter 13. Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar. Tamar is not an accidental name. We have another Tamar, Tamar that is mentioned already in the genealogy of Yeshua in Matthew chapter 1. That Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Judah, the son of Jacob. And Judah had 3 sons. Tamar married the oldest son. He died. So the second son had to perform the leveraged marriage according to the law of Moses, which is that if his sister-in-law is not with a child, doesn't have children, the next brother has to provide children for his brother's widow. In other words, has to have sex with her and take her as a wife and provide for her a child, a male child. Why? There's no social security in that world, and the only security a wife has is from her children. She has no children. She doesn't have a way to make a living. So that Tamar, the first Tamar, played the prostitute and seduced Judah and had a son from Judah, which means a son that was born out of incest. The father-in-law with his bride, with his son's wife, had a child. His name was Peretz, and all the tribe of Judah are descendants of this Peretz that was a child of incest, in other words, a bastard. It's a very important point for the genealogy of Jesus, and that's another subject. On another occasion we'll talk about it. So here we have Absalom, Tamar his sister, and Amnon, son of David. But Amnon was so distressed. He was sick. He became sick, depressed, because he couldn't have Tamar, the beautiful Tamar. For she was a virgin, the text says, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend. The word friend here it's a very interesting thing. When the Bible talks about somebody's friend, you should be suspicious. You should watch out for your friends even more than you watch out for your enemies, in the biblical sense. So Amnon had a friend. Who is this friend? This friend is Yonadav, the son of Shimei, David's brother, one of David's brother's nephews. His name is Yonadav, and the Hebrew text says in verse 3 that he was a wise man. But a wise man, again, somebody who's called a wise man, also watch out from him. The English translation, the New King James translation, translates it as a commentary. He was a very crafty man. A very crafty man, this Yonadav. And he said to him, why are you, king's son, becoming, so distressed? Thinner and thinner day after day. Every day you're depressed. Why don't you tell me? Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother's Absalom's sister. So Yonadav, the crafty man, the wise man, says to Amnon, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill, and when your father comes to see you, say to him, please let my sister Tamar come and give me food and nourish me and prepare food for me in my sight, so that I may see it and eat it from her hand. Then Amnon lay down, pretended to be ill, and when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand. David didn't suspect anything. Amnon is a prince. He is the next in line to take the throne of David. He's got servants. We'll find the servants in a few minutes in the story. And he has this advisor, his friend, Yonadav. So he lays down, pretends to be ill. The king comes to visit him, which already is an interesting thing, that King David really loved his family. King David really cared for his family, and when he hears that one of his sons is sick, he comes to visit him. That's the normal thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And when he comes to visit him, Amnon pretends to be very sick, and he says, send me Tamar, my sister, to fix me some food. David, not suspecting of anything, goes home and sends Tamar, saying, now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. So Tamar went to her brother's house, Amnon's house, and he lying down. Then she took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and baked the cake. Well, that turned Amnon even more, watching her kneading that dough. And she took a pan and placed the two cakes that she made for him. But he refused to eat. Then Amnon said, have everyone go from my side. All of his servants, he kicks out all of his servants from his house. And they go out from him. And Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into my bedroom, that I may eat from your hand. And Tamar, innocent virgin, not suspecting anything, takes the cake which she made and brought it to Amnon, her brother, in his bedroom. And when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come lay with me, my sister. But she answered him, no, my brother, do not force me, for no such a thing should be done in Israel. It's not right. Do not do this disgraceful thing, shameful thing. It's not right. And where could I take my shame if you did it? She says. As for you, you would be like one of the fools of Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. In other words, if you really love me, ask for my hand from my father, from the king, and the king will let you marry me. In those days, marriage of half-sister would have been, depends on which side, would have been okay. That's what the text seems to imply. However, he didn't hear her voice. He didn't heed her voice. And being stronger than she is, he forced himself on her. And Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred which he had her was greater than the love which he had for her. And that's often the case. When abuse happens, rape happens, usually love is not born. Hate is born on both sides. So he says to his servants, get out of here, take her out of here. He tells her, go out, I don't want to see you anymore. So she said to him, no, indeed, this is evil. Sending me away is worse than the other thing that you did to me. But he would not listen to her. And he called his servant who attended him and said, here, put this woman out, away from me. Bolt the door behind her. I don't want to see her anymore. Ugly. Now she was wearing a robe made of colors with sleeves, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head, tore her robe of many colors that was on her, laid her hand on her head, and went away crying bitterly. When Absalom, her brother, said to her, has Amnon your brother been with you? In other words, have you had sex with your brother? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother's house. In other words, she saw nowhere. She didn't date anybody. She didn't go to parties. She was locked up in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all this, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. In other words, there was a rift in the family between Absalom and Amnon, and even with King David. And it came to pass, after 2 full years, that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Chatzor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Then Absalom came to the king and said, kindly note, your servant has sheep shearers, not sheep shearers party, sheep shearers feast. Please let the king and his servant go with your servant. Come with me, in other words. Go to this celebration. But the king said to Absalom, no, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be burdened to you. Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. King David blessed Absalom. Absalom said, if not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. The king said to him, why should he go with you? But Absalom urged him, so he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, "Watch now when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, kill him. Do not be afraid, I have not commanded you. No, do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? I'm giving you a command, you have to obey it. Be courageous and valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled, afraid of Absalom. And it came to pass, while they were away, the news came to David, saying, "Absalom killed all the king's sons, and not one of them is left." So King David arose and tore his garments and lay on the ground, and all the servants stood by, and their clothes torn. They followed the king. Then Jonadab, the same Jonadab that advised Amnon, answered and said, "Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all your young men, the king's sons, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom this has been determined from the day that he forced himself on Tamar, his sister. Now therefore let not my lord the king take this thing to his heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead. No, only Amnon is dead." Then Absalom fled, and the young man who was keeping watch lifted his eyes and looked, and there were many people were coming from the road on the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said to the king, "Look, the king's sons are all coming back, as your servant said, so it is." So it was, as soon as he had finished speaking, that the king's sons indeed came, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And the king and all of his servants wept bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, but he had been comforted concerning Amnon, because he was dead. The end of chapter 13. So in summary, what do we have here? Absalom has his brother Amnon killed. He waits 2 years for the opportunity to get him away from David, to get the opportunity to kill him and avenge his sister. Planned, executed, perfectly executed. But we find out from the conversation of Jonadab, the king's nephew, that he knows what's going to happen in the sheep shearing party before internet, before telephone, before. Why does he know that? Because it was his plan. He is the one who advised Absalom what to do and how to kill Amnon. And he tells the son, "Don't worry, not all your sons are." The rumor came that all the sons. This kind of rumor, folks, is very, very popular in the Middle East. Everything is exaggerated. Everything is blown out of proportions. This is true now in this war with Gaza. The character of the Middle Eastern people. And who is this Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur? That's Absalom's and Tamar's grandfather, because David married the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, and she was the mother of Absalom and Tamar, So Absalom runs and stays 3 years up there in the land of Geshur, which is today's Golan Heights, on the border with Syria, on the slopes of the highest mountain in the Middle East, Mount Hermon. But when David misses his son Absalom, because he's now the official heir to the throne, he's the upcoming king of Israel. David misses his son and he wants to go see him, but he doesn't go. And Absalom knows that David is missing him, and we find out that Absalom returns to Judah in the next chapters. But this scandal in the family, the rape, the incest of a brother against his half-sister, is a motivation now for Absalom, the new heir to the throne, to hate his father, to accuse his father, to want to take over his father. And even though he is the heir to the throne, he is not happy with that. He's not satisfied to wait for his father to die, but he wants to shame David. For his lack of justice against Amnon. So we see David is strong in many ways and he's weak in many ways. He's essentially weak against women. And against his own sons, he's has a double standard. What he wouldn't suffer from anybody else, he lets his sons get by with it. A lot of leaders are like that. A lot of leaders are like that. And we'll learn more about David in the future lessons. But this very sad story with very, very interesting, conniving advisor that is actually a nephew of King David, Yonadav. We have things to learn from it. I suggest you read it for yourself and you meditate on it and try to learn some things that I didn't mention on this lesson. God bless all of you. Amen.